What makes the present-day snooker player better than the snooker players of the past? And let me be clear, when I say the past, I don't just mean the 1980s, 90s, or even the early 2000s. What is it that makes the present-day snooker player far superior to the competition of 10 or maybe even as little as 5 years ago? Now, I'm sure you're thinking, but are they? I mean, haven't we got to a stage now where the greatest players to have ever played the game are at least slightly past their best? And younger generations just don't seem to be able to live up to the same standards. At least that's what it feels like the audience believes. Despite this, we've seen an increase in the number of shots that seem to defy physics itself. Observe play that seems to disregard nerves or tension. Regularly note a record number of century breaks in each tournament, including a greater number of maximum breaks. We've even recently started to experience multiple maximum breaks in the same match, and sometimes the players achieving these new heights are the very same players that have been competing at the very top of the game for the entirety of this century. But more about them later. Because first of all, we need to start somewhere that at least seems obvious. Raw potting ability.
Well, what a shot.
So now I'm going to attempt to show you how good the modern players become with a demonstration. I've played that pretty well, but I wonder how many of those I can pot in a row. Now, this demonstration only works until you realise I'm nowhere near as good as the players from the past. But anyway. Ooh. Now, it's a tough shot, and 4 seems pretty good. Or at least it seems pretty good until you compare it to the current world champion. Long before winning the World Championships, here he is knocking in 42 of these shots consecutively. Now, I don't necessarily think this is the best way to practice straight pots, but think of it more as a test. I'm taking that test and only getting 4, whereas he's getting 42. And it just means when a top player gets a straight long pot like this one, instead of queuing across it horribly and missing it by a mile like I might in a pressure situation, they just go and knock it in. Also, this means when position is lost in the middle of a break, instead of playing safe, the modern player is looking for more of an attacking option, which is why we're seeing an increased number of recovery shots being played. In fact, all types of shot are being potted more frequently, and this is even having an effect on the way the top players play safe. In the 2005 UK Championship final, Ding Junhui was opening the Reds up with every opportunity, not just in the middle of breaks, but also on safety shots as well. Steve Davis, on the other hand, didn't want to do this. He wanted to keep the balls as safe as possible after he played a shot, because he was scared about the next shot Ding was about to play. And in the modern game, we're seeing players play the defensive safety shot a lot more often and take advantage of the fact that if nothing actually pots, then a player cannot pot it. So we're seeing thinner safety shots to hopefully push less of the object balls on, and when we get down to a single ball safety shot, players are always looking to try and get the object ball safe, sometimes even if this means putting the cue ball in a more open position. And a great example of that is the side-to-side safety we see from almost every pro now on a respotted black. It's all about keeping the object ball safe and stopping your opponent having a clean look at a pot. And of course, ideally, you want to be getting your opponent in a snooker. It wasn't too long ago that this would be a guaranteed way in a lot of situations of getting yourself the next chance. But of course, this has changed quite a bit as well. Again, this is where the modern player has improved so much and is now so good at keeping the ball safe from some of the game's toughest snookers. Whether that be escaping from the snooker and keeping the cue ball in a safe location, hitting a single ball and knocking it safe, or even sometimes clipping a ball and getting the cue ball to come back into bulk. I'm going to have a go at something here where I've got to escape from the snooker in behind the yellow, and the only safe place I can see is here. So let's see, first go, if I can get this right. So I've got to try and find the angle of 2 cushions and see if I can get down and land on that red. So let's see if I can do it. Oh, I think I've got that wrong. Yeah, I don't think that would go back because the player would expect me to hit it next time, and I've left good chances. For the last few years, all types of containing safety have become a more necessary and vital part of the game. What this means is fewer chances, and what that means is the modern players had to improve their break building. And I'm not just talking about the centuries or 147s that I mentioned in the introduction. I'm talking about getting a chance like this and almost being expected to win the frame from it. So I'm not sure I'm going to get the first red. I've got it, but now I'd be expected to either play off the 2 loose reds I've got here and open the balls up eventually, or maybe I've got a good angle here, play the split off the blue. Either way, I'd have to win the game from a tight, difficult position. Nowadays, the positional play of the game's elite is on another level, and combined with how well they're able to pot, it means they can clear the table from some of the most impossible looking situations. And this Luca Bracel clearance is a great example of that, especially when you consider that Luca wasn't exactly in great form when he got it. If I remember, I'll leave a link to the video in the description. But here's the question, because the modern professional may well find themselves in this position, with an unlikely chance to clear the table and win the frame on the final black, and with the ability to do it. But what happens if they get nervous? And the answer to that question is, yeah, sometimes they get nervous, sometimes really nervous, but often they still clear the table anyway. The modern game is full of players who are just unbelievably resilient, that on the right day you feel could cope with almost anything. But what happens if the same players come to the table and there's just not the shot on to win the game from it? What can they do then? And the answer is manipulate the game to their advantage. Instead of playing safe off the safe red, I'm trying to bring all the balls into play there. And that gives me closer to a 50-50 chance of winning the game, even if I'm a long way behind. But I think this gets fascinating when a player's in front in the game, because in the past in this situation, if I've landed on no colour here, I mean I could play the blue, but I don't need to take that chance, I'd have probably just flicked off the brown for the snooker. And yeah, that's a fairly good shot, but we've seen so often now that players are able to escape from these snookers and successfully get away with it, that a player might instead choose to not quite play as good a safety shot from this position. And here I think you can probably try and get the brown and green safe. Yeah, the green's fairly good, the brown's not great. But this means that it's going to take my opponent more attempts now to clear the table, and it means they get further from having a 50-50 chance of winning the game because they're going to need more chances. You might also include the shot to nothing in this category, whereas in the past players would be playing for the bulk cushion and then possibly a snooker. Now, as that doesn't help so much, they're looking to play position directly off these shots. Ronnie O'Sullivan is an example of a player who will often deploy this tactic, and what I find fascinating is the players at the top of the game now are sometimes the same players who have been at the top of the game for the last 20 or even 30 years, but they've learned to innovate and improve as well, and maybe not in terms of potting, but in every other category we've talked about so far, they've been able to keep up and make improvements and remain close to, if not right at the very top of the game. Before we do any more, let's just find Thomas, who's in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, which is there. And let's not forget about the equipment. Although a cue is technically still a bit of wood, some of them are produced these days in a way that allows you to hit the shot very slightly straighter, and that's before we mention the extensions. But I think the biggest change revolves around the chalk that's almost completely prevented kicks in the game. So why is the modern day player better than those of just a few years ago? Well, because they need to keep up, not only with the younger players coming through potting ability, but also the consistency in which they pot the balls, and they can either keep up with this or have to find other solutions. Which is why we're seeing more defensive safety shots and improvements to the way containing safety shots and snooker escapes are made. Positional players improves as well to help deal with a more awkward table and the fact that players are getting fewer and fewer chances these days. And the game's elite are just becoming better and better at manipulating the game in their favour to give themselves the better chances of winning, especially when they're in front in the frame. And improvements in technology has helped as well. But if you want to improve your game, then have a look at these two videos that are designed to do just that. And remember, don't just watch, play, and make the commitment to becoming a better player by subscribing to the channel and visit the website. See you later.